As touring and adventure travel restarts and human beings do start to explore the world once more where they can, how can we really limit our negative impact on the environment and ensure that we're contributing positively to local communities as we go forward? So there's some of the things we're going to be talking about during this session, and I'm thrilled to be joined by this very experienced travel lineup of Joanna Reeve, who is Intrepid Travel's newly promoted Head of Industry and Tailor-Made Sales for the EMEA region. Hi, Jo.
Hi.
Tim Williamson, who is a Director of Responsible Travel. Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining.
Hi there.
And finally, Rudyard Zulik, who is Head of International Markets and Marketing Subdirectorate for Chile, beautiful country of Chile. So thanks all again for joining. Now, firstly, I'm going to start with this question about whether travel and the thoughts of travel have changed during the pandemic, what the positive and negative impacts have been. Obviously, we know it's been massively negative in some ways, of course, but in terms of consequences that you might have identified as we've been moving through this. Joanna, could you talk us a little bit first from the Intrepid side in terms of how you feel things are or know things have been changing during all of this?
Yes, well, I think there's negatives and positives to all of this. I mean, the negatives are pretty obvious. They've been pretty devastating for all involved in the travel industries, from agents, operators, suppliers, local communities and destinations. And that's touched kind of every part of the journey. However, you know, I think that there are some positives to kind of come from that as well, in the fact that we've all been locked away for a very long time. And I think in that time, we've all been doing a bit of revaluation of our lives, how we want to conduct our lives, including travel, and how we want to spend our time going forward. And I also think with that has come a great degree of empathy of we're all in this together, whether that be, you know, as a nation or as a globe. And I think that real need for connectivity, that kind of human empathy is a really kind of strongly felt emotion that I hope we'll see kind of translate through travel and how people then approach their travels. And with that, of course, a greater awareness of the negative impacts that we've been having by traveling prior, and how we want to adjust that going forward. So I think there are lots of positives that will come from this very negative situation that we've been faced with.
Okay, thank you. And I know Intrepid was obviously, you know, leading the way in this field anyway, but we'll perhaps go on to talk a bit later on in terms of, you know, any other solid concrete things that you see, you know, changing as a business. Tim, what are your thoughts on whether there's been a change, a shift in how people think, or is it all just talk, or do you think people are genuinely thinking differently?
Well, I think I think that we talk about the positives and negatives first. I mean, clearly from a positive side, the planet's had a bit of chance to breathe without us flying around, without the millions of tons of carbon dioxide that have been burnt. I mean, you know, we should always remember that, you know, other heavy industry has continued the whole time pretty much. So, you know, but there were definitely signs through the sort of the deepest lockdowns that, you know, the world had a chance to take breath. And obviously, you know, Joe's highlighted some of the, you know, the obvious negatives and some of the other thoughts around what's happened to travel in the last year. I think a couple that spring to mind specifically around, you know, adventure is firstly around conservation, which has been massively impacted. You know, conservation and tourism are two sides of the same coin, and so much of conservation is funded by travel. And we're seeing, you know, just horror stories all around the world that we get fed back around, you know, communities that are poaching bushmeat to survive and to eat. And obviously, as less locals are employed in security, then poaching for profit, for, you know, obviously around rhinos is continuing. But I would echo Joe's points around the, you know, we tend to think a lot about, you know, how it's affected us in the source markets and how we, you know, how our businesses are impacted. But I think there are so many communities that are so dependent on tourism and haven't got the sort of safety nets that some of the developed worlds have got in terms of furlough or grants or other sort of safety blankets. And this pandemic has really highlighted just how many communities absolutely depend on tourism. And for me, they need to be at the forefront as we plan the slow and gradual return that we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it needs to be, we're all talking in the right place, obviously, but a responsible return to tourism and traveling in a responsible way, almost, isn't it? So hopefully this will be the reset that we're hoping for, because yeah, those communities, those wildlife areas, they need the support that tourism does bring them. And over to you, Rudyard, in terms of Chile. How would you say that this has affected, tourism? Well, obviously, it's been affected you very negatively in terms of no one coming, but has it been a chance to pause, reflect? What's it been like for Chile from the perspective of tourism?
Yeah, definitely has been something new for all of us, for the country, for the world, for everyone. I'm absolutely agree with what Tim said about also conservation, the spaces, the local communities. Of course, we have been affected like everyone else in terms of the persons of health, and of course, tourism. It's been affected really negative in a side of the economic impact, of course, but also I believe that this pandemic has provided people the chance to slow down, to think, to breathe a little bit deeper.
Mhm.
I just going to give in a simple example. Someone goes into Facebook until being, like 4 months or 5 months when pandemic start with remembers of traveling or places where they have been. And in terms of the country, for example, for us, we think a lot what we can do, what we should change. And we in Chile, we are really lucky to have this amazing country with really wide open spaces, which has different communities and really special people all over the places. So we have been working a lot from the private, from the public sector in order to think when things come back to travel, when things get back to somehow the new normality. That's what people nowadays said. How we can do it better in terms of the community, in terms of the planet. And people nowadays, they want to really enjoy their time.
Mm.
And I believe here, of course, we are been also working with all the TMCs communities in order when everything starts again, have all the protocols formally and also these new ideas and plans ready to implement them when it's time to.
Brilliant. Yeah. Really using the time to think how things could be done differently. Because again, I'm sure Chile was already on in the amazing right path when it comes to all this kind of travel anyway. So, but yeah, gives that chance to get more structures in place and build back better is an overused saying, but hopefully, come back in an even better way. So as travel starts to resume, what are the key points of consideration in doing so responsibly? What changes do you think businesses need to make now as we go forward in terms of changing their business approach, or maybe some simple steps that they can do even if they're not doing already? Joe, maybe start with you.
Yeah, I mean, one topic that we probably would never have brought up before, which I think we will now, is just that whole element of trust and safety, number one. I mean, we've been through a health crisis for the last 12 months, and we need to make sure that when we do reopen travel, again, fingers crossed, that we do that conscientiously, because not only is that going to have an impact on our travellers, obviously that also directly impacts the communities that we'll be visiting as well. So we have our local DMC network, our global DMC network, thankfully, and that's helped us over the last 12 months really keep track of what's happening in destination, what we need to be introducing, responsibilities that we have as a tour operator to introduce people back into particular places. So testing, vaccination policy is super important. And of course, trust, simple trust with operators that we're going to do what we say we're going to do. So that's kind of number one. And then of course, the other areas which we, as you said, for the last 30 years have been doing as a business anyway. But I think now, thankfully, that's kind of a more general mindset around an approach to responsible tourism. Just kind of, it's how and where is how and you travel and what you do when you're there, essentially. So, switching out unnecessary flights, for example, and taking the train, using public transports. Now, due to the shift in mindset of customers and their interest now in well-being and health, active trips, cycling, walking more, kind of human-powered trips as opposed to kind of air-powered trips. Where you eat, where you stay, all of those components of a trip, where you visit and how you visit a place, all of those things are really important, simple things that are kind of easy to change, very manageable, and actually improve the experience anyway. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. So I think that it's that approach of, it's not necessarily about the destination. It's about what you do when you're there, how you travel to that destination, and how you connect with the local communities there, ensuring that you are having a positive impact and you're leaving a destination or a country in a better way than when you found it, essentially.
Yeah, making a long-term contribution to it rather than just take. Yeah. And also, I guess, challenging your supply chain so that everybody along the line knows that, look, guys, these are the standards we are now going to be sticking to. So let's really try and operate together to make sure we're all on the same page in what we're kind of providing, which I'm sure is, as I said, again, is what you've been doing anyway, but maybe for some DMCs, maybe they've had to challenge themselves a little bit more to make sure that they can, offer the right kind of level of service. It's certainly thoughtful UK travellers are going to be kind of looking for. Tim, what about you? What do you think a business should be getting their ducks in a row? What should they be doing really to make sure that they are thinking like a responsible travel business?
Well, I think as travel and adventure builds back, I think for me the key point, pre-pandemic is the same as post-pandemic, and that's around global heating. The difference is that we're now a year and a half closer to 2030 target, 1.5 temperature degrees, and we know that travel is a major contributor to that, and we have to do something about it. And we also know that it is about carbon reduction. It is not about making promises for tomorrow or offsetting. It's around what we can do as individual businesses to reduce carbon now. I think the new thing that's coming through as a greater kind of focus is around nature. Now, nature is, in two senses. First of all, nature is the other side of carbon. Nature is the way that we absorb carbon, and we are managing to do both. We're managing to burn more carbon dioxide, and we're managing to destroy more nature. Hence, we double the effect of global heating, which is extremely bad news. But why I think it relates to travel is that nature is intrinsic in travel. So many travelers, particularly I mention it now because it's around about adventure travel. It's around about it's not about so much of maybe what we might see in the mainstream. We travel to experience different landscapes. We travel to see different species, to see different countries, to see wildlife and flora and fauna that's different to our own. So I think that whole area around nature positivity, our trips, our style of travel being positive to nature, I can see that becoming something we talk about more and more as we go on, and maybe something that's been accelerated by the pandemic. But for me, the pandemic is a little blip in the major issue, which is around our planet overheating and what we do about that.
Yeah. And for you, Roger, in terms of Chile, obviously fantastic wild open spaces, nature, as you said. So perhaps talk a little bit about that element of it, and also in terms of what you as a government, as a tourist official organisation, is perhaps putting in place to make sure that all the little guys, the DMCs, the hoteliers, those kind of guys can really help elevate what they're doing in terms of responsible travel.
Yeah, definitely. Something in terms of nature, of course, we are really blessed. We got many different types of geography in just one country. And we have been working on something we deeply understood as a government and all the different actors somehow from the tourism industry. This 1.5 year of pandemic, more or less, is that we have to work really together. And tourism is such a circle that if everybody in that circle is not really connected and working in the same line, it's really hard that we get to a same point. So basically, we have been working on one side, for example, in terms of different seals of responsible travel for hotels, for DMCs. We have been also working with the guides, which are a really, really important element because they transmit what the country represents in terms of nature, in terms of culture of its people. So we have been working with them through this pandemic to support them in many different ways, so that they can really transmit that. And also, of course, in all the protocols that we will have, even if you are in the middle of the desert or down in Patagonian Pampas, you need to follow protocols so we make it safe for all of us. And something that it's really important as well is to have the small local communities or really isolated places that we have in Chile, that maybe you trek for 4 or 5 hours literally in the middle of nowhere, and then you get to an amazing lagoon in the middle of the Andes that there's a family that lives there. It's try to include them as well, you know? And that's what people is looking for, like real experiences with open spaces where you can basically take something back with you from the people that, besides the amazing landscape, make your experience really, really unforgettable.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not, as you say, it's all part of the same circle, really, isn't it? You should go to a place and experience all of those things, as well as obviously appreciating you're part of the larger circular tourism economy. Do you feel that there has been a change in consumer mindset? Is it something palpable that you're seeing in terms of customers coming to you? Again, you're already in that field, but do you feel there's a wider, this is changing?
I think so. I think that there is definitely a conscious shift towards wanting to understand what you're contributing to. That's definitely something that has shifted. I mean, you know, interestingly enough, a lot of people will come to Intrepid in the same way as they would other travel businesses, in the fact that they're looking for value-led experiences. They'll look at a destination they want to visit, and they'll look at the value, and it'll be price related. And that we've seen many customers come to us for that reason. However, the second or third time that they travel with us will be down to understanding what a responsible travel experience looks and feels like, how enriching that is, how good that feels, how great it is to connect with those local communities. And so they return for that reason. So I think the shift is potentially that you'll have more and more people that will be balancing that up from the get-go, alongside price and destination. And potentially the destination choices are changing also closer to home, obviously, whether that be exploring your own backyard, whether that be somewhere in the UK, or looking to go somewhere for longer. So less short break trips, maybe that big bucket list, always wanted to go to destination and maybe go for longer or spend more when you're there, rather than take travel for granted. So I definitely think there's that kind of conscious decision making that's coming into play that perhaps was more of a secondary thought before.
Good. Yeah, good to hear. Tim, again, your customers were already on this pathway, but do you feel there's been a wider consumer shift? Do you think you're going to see an uptick in people coming to you for ideas and suggestions?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I think it's too early to tell what the effect of the pandemic is, because obviously we haven't really, we're only seeing the sort of first, shoots of people traveling again. But I think you're right, and Joe's highlighted it. The signs were there, whether it's in bookings or surveys pre-COVID, that there's an awareness of some of the issues around travel and to try and avoid them. And hence, I guess the success of responsible travel in the last few years is testament to that, and also Intrepid. So yes, I think it's been there, but also we position it very much as, rather than a sort of altruistic sort of view that you've got to sacrifice in order to to travel better. I don't think that's true at all. I think we position it very much as a win-win. When you treat local communities and help preserve and conserve nature, you as a customer, you as a traveler, actually have a better experience, and we see that through our reviews. Those sort of communities that are treated well, paid well, employed as local guides, open up in such a way that maybe they don't to other companies and to other tours, giving that service scores and review scores that are off the scale. So I don't think it's about purely around making sacrifices in order to have a more responsible holiday. I think, we genuinely think, responsible holidays are better.
Yeah, far more rewarding in the long term. And it would be good to see. We've heard some talk of this concept of travel less, stay longer, which we'd all like to see come to fruition. I mean, certainly, I'm sure in Chile, certainly UK European guests come to you for quite a long time, don't they, Rudyard, anyway, in terms of how the length of stay. But do you recognise any of those trends as somewhere that will be good for, well, obviously they'll be good for Chile, but do you think they might come through for you?
I hope so, as Tim said. Yeah, but yes, we believe that some part of the people that is thinking of coming to Chile, as you said, we're far away or really close. Doesn't depend on where you are, but for the UK especially, it's a long trip. So basically, I'm agree with you that probably people will stay longer. We have seen or hear, because we have our borders today closed, but we believe that people it's staying longer. They are coming with a purpose. We see some other people, they learned to work remotely. Doesn't matter what they do. So to say, you know what, I'm going to Chile. I'm going to explore. I'm going to learn about the country, the culture, but I can stay maybe an extra week or so and work from there. So we believe that it's going to be something that it's going to change. And then we also believe there is going to be those travelers in some special age, and really demographic, that after being 1.5 years or 2 years, we don't know exactly, home lockdowns, etc. You know what? Now I got the time. I got the necessary safety somehow. I'm going to Chile or to any other place, and they are just taking it and traveling. They are not planning really so much their travel. So yeah, it's going to change definitely some part of it.
Okay. And to kind of wrap up now, thinking about our audience watching, travel agents, thinking how they're going to move themselves forward out of this. What tips would you have for them when they're thinking about selling, obviously touring and adventure to their clients and putting a really responsible hat on? Perhaps Joe, what sort of tips would you have for travel agents really going forward?
I know it's really difficult. First of all, I kind of appreciate that the travel agent dealing with so many different suppliers, lots of different customer requests. That, to put it frankly, there's a lot of greenwashing out there as well. It's hard to know for sure what recommendations are kind of solid ones. I think the two kind of easiest ways of helping agents to kind of identify that is, first of all, certification. Certification is one that you can feel confident of. Intrepid is a B Corp, for example. It's a non-profit organisation which really holds businesses accountable. We've been doing this for years, but it gives us an independent, I guess, stamp of approval that what we're doing is genuinely what we're doing, and the impact is a good one. And then the other thing, which is a little bit simpler than that, because not everyone has a certification, I appreciate that, is to ask questions. Ask questions, and then companies that really are kind of putting behind what they're saying will be able to have those answers. Local leaders, which accommodations will we be using? Is this eco-friendly? If we're going to this particular attraction that has animals or children or these sorts of things, I want to understand more about that organisation. And I think that's it really, to understand the questions that you need to ask your partners, and then also that you can help guide your customers with those sorts of kind of, I guess, fact checking, which is probably the best place to start.
Yeah. Tim, what tips would you have?
I completely agree with all of Joe's points. I think there's no getting away. When you've got a demanding customer in front of you, you need to have done your homework. You need to understand how polluting that large cruise ship is. You really need to understand the pros and cons of carbon offsetting. So that idea of doing your homework is absolutely crucial. I think we've touched on it, but it comes back to carbon. We all need to fly less. We need to go for longer. We can have more rewarding trips that benefit local communities, but for the planet, we all need to fly less. So there's a really big education process around customers around flying less. And then I think probably the third one I'd say is book with a responsible operator. Joe's right. B Corp gives Intrepid a really good badge that that shows they meet very, very high standards. And if you've got companies like Responsible Travel, Intrepid are a partner of Responsible Travel, so the network is kind of all linked. Book through them, and I'm pleased to say there's a bit of a heads up. We are doing a site, a part of our site which we're building at the moment, which puts all the trips together who will and are able to work with agents. So that's a kind of a watch this space. It's coming, but it's a little teaser that even through our platform, there's the opportunity to give your customers a responsible trip as an agent.
Oh, great. I love that soundbite. I'm going to leave it there on that positive note that agents can come to you as a massive resource for the kind of places that they could be sending their clients to. That's all we've got time for this session. So huge thank you to the panel for sharing their time and insights, experiences with us.
Great. I can see Ben is in the room, who has already asked a question in the last room. So I will kick off with that one. And Tim, I'm going to come to you first to ask about this. Ben is asking, how do you see the future of air travel in terms of responsibility? Do you predict there'll be more fuel efficient aircraft or reduced frequencies? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, Ben, I do. I think technology is moving at a pace, especially in efficiency with 787s and A350s, but also with sustainable fuels. And the first small electric planes are doing short little hops, and you can see short haul. EasyJet have already said that that they see that as the future. But I think the issue with aviation is prior to the pandemic was the sort of seismic growth that was going on, and that was unsustainable. So I think yes, efficiency and eco flying is coming, but not fast enough for the planet. You think of our 1.5 degree heating target by 2030 is 8.5 years away. So I think there's no substitute for flying less, and it doesn't have to be at the detriment of experience and fantastic holidays, because you can go for longer. So that is the short term in terms of sustainable aviation. But hopefully efficient flying will come soon enough, and then we can fly as often as we want. But I think we're a little way from that at the moment.
Great, thank you. And Joe, can I ask you what your thoughts are on air travel, responsible air travel from an Intrepid perspective?
Yeah, so the things that we've always kind of tried to do in Intrepid is not take unnecessary domestic flights, for example. Think carefully about how we're not only the experience that customers are having and how rich that experience is, but then the impact that has on the local community and the environment itself. Our new range of trips, the Intrepid Premium trips, for example, we made conscious effort to remove any domestic flights where there was a scenic train journey, for example, that we could have in its place, or make sure that we're making the most of people's kind of renewed drive for active experiences and kind of using human power as much as possible. So kind of walking, taking public transport, cycling, and seeing the country from, which is actually a great way to see it. So it doesn't feel as though you're losing out. It's just a default in the past that people have used domestic flights when you don't always have to.
Okay, great, thanks. And Ben has actually given the example where France is banning domestic flights where trains or buses can complete the journey in less than 2.5 hours. So Rudyard, I just wanted to come to you and ask about Chile. Do you have any plans to address responsible air travel, make any changes in the near future?
Yes, we do have some. We are working actually in different alternatives. One, as Tim mentioned, nowadays with technology of the different aircrafts, I think it's the first step for all of us from the airlines. And then in specifically case of Chile, we are seeing options because there are some areas that you can travel by different ways. There are some others that unfortunately do the distance. We still need the planes to go, for example, to the extremes of the country, but we are working internally to see how to try to improve for the upcoming future and present in order to make a good impact on the planet.
Great, thank you. And so everyone who's joined the room, if you didn't have any questions for our panel, please do pop them in the chat and we'll get to them today. I also wanted to ask about under-tourism and over-tourism and kind of the balance that we're now facing with that. In pre-pandemic, we were hearing a lot about over-tourism, and now we're hearing more about the risk of under-tourism, where a lack of visitors could impact on communities that relied on tourism the most. I just wanted to ask what your thoughts are on that. Tim, can I come to you first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we asked, over tourism was an issue pre-pandemic, and we're seeing little pockets of it pop up. I live in Brighton, and it's busy. It's really busy, busier than probably I've ever seen it before. But that's inevitable where supply is restricted and demand is channeled into a very few places where travel is open or easy. So that's almost inevitable. But I think we're a long way from where we were before on over tourism. And I think the bigger issue by far is under tourism. When you look at the number of communities around the world that absolutely depend on tourism. And Rudyard's got lots of examples across Chile where, communities have little or no other income other than comes through tourism. And we see that all over the place, whether I'm talking to some of our operators in Croatia or Nepal or, all over the globe. So, we're really concerned that, without tourists coming back and coming back in decent numbers, not swamping numbers, but decent numbers, those communities are going to really suffer, and we're genuinely worried about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And Joe, I mean, could you talk to us a bit about any ways we could try and find a middle ground between the two, and the kinds of things that Intrepid does to ensure a responsible spread of tourism between destinations?
Yeah, there's quite a few things that you can do. Actually, I think trends are that those kind of more well-known places, if kind of thinking best of destinations, there are some alternatives which I think are becoming more popular anyway, but we make sure in our tours that we're offering these up. And a lot of these kind of, I guess, crown and glory destinations aren't actually all that they kind of live up to be. And it's actually quite an unpleasant experience. And of course, it doesn't do the local communities any good either. Other things that we do is, for example, kind of spreading hotel groups or spreading customers across hotels. As a business, we would probably get cheaper rates, and it would be much easier for us to put everybody in one hotel, for example, one large hotel in a central location, but actually spreading in smaller groups across more locally owned properties, smaller hotels, things like that. Again, it's a better experience for the customer, and it feeds back into local communities too. So I think there's definitely always a middle ground.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Natalie has asked a question. She's asking, should there be a quota imposed at tourist attractions or cities to avoid overcrowding and maybe try and mitigate over-tourism? Rudyard, can I ask you about that in Chile? Are there lots of quotas or restrictions in terms of how many people can visit destinations or sites at one time?
Yes, definitely. This is something that started even before pandemic. We are lucky to have wide open spaces, so we don't get too much crowded in specific areas. But just to give you an example, the different national parks within the country and some other attractives, they are starting to get some quotas of how many people can go there any day, in terms if they are going, for example, by foot or by horses or bikes. So the impact it's somehow measured, and we don't get too many people in places, and we keep it more or less stable. In terms of the city, it's a little bit more complicated, of course, to manage that in a little bit more bigger cities that may be also from interest of the tourists. And just for adding what Joanna and Tim says, definitely we want that when possible, tourists cut back, because many different local communities also has suffered a long time already.
Okay, great. Thank you. Paul has just popped a question in the chat as well. What are you most proud of when it comes to sustainable tourism? Joe, can I come to you and ask that? What are you most proud of?
Well, there's so many things. As a business, I'm really proud, that we're a B Corp company. We really do what we say we're going to do. Some enormous achievements over the last 30 years. The ones that spring to mind at the top of my head: first tour operator to ban elephant riding, Other tour operators followed suit. It's now very understood as to why we made that move. More recently, I think it's just local communities, female empowerment, local leaders, female leaders in Morocco and India, kind of making changes on the ground that really benefits women there, which we know is a huge contributor to having a better planet in general, feeding into the education system, all sorts of things, all of the positive impact that travel has enabled us to do, which means we can continue to go to these places and enjoy the planet that we have, hopefully soon.
Yes, absolutely. And Tim, what about responsible travel? What are you most proud of when it comes to sustainable tourism?
Yeah, well, we last April we celebrated our 20th birthday, and you think of what travel was like 20 years ago. You know, Justin Francis, when he founded the company, wanted to create a new category because responsible tourism really didn't exist, and the words weren't used. Though, you look at the searches at the time, it wasn't a category. So the fact we founded that, and the fact that we're all here, in 2021 talking about responsible tourism, responsible travel, I think it's a fantastic thing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. You may have noticed that was our cue. And thank you, Joe, Tim and Rudyard, for joining us for the live Q&A today.